The U.S. can't do without Greenland. That's what President Trump says as Vice President JD Vance warns about Chinese threats as he visits the Arctic island. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
It's not a question of, do you think we can do without it? We can't.
The Trump administration now sounding very serious about the U.S. annexing Greenland. President Trump on Friday warns that China and Russia are expanding their influence in the Arctic, including by sending more ships to that region. Trump says the U.S. needs Greenland to ensure international security.
If you look at Greenland right now, if you look at the waterways, you have Chinese and Russian ships all over the place.
Greenland is semi-autonomous territory that belongs to Denmark, is in a strategic location between North America, Europe, and Russia. President Trump's reiteration of his desire to get it comes as Vice President JD Vance is visiting a U.S. military base in the Arctic island. The vice president issues a strong message to the Danish government, saying it failed to invest enough to protect Greenland from Chinese and Russian threats.
As China and Russia have taken greater and greater interest in Greenland, in this base, in the activities of the brave Americans right here, we know that too often our allies in Europe have not kept pace. They haven't kept pace with military spending, and Denmark has not kept pace in devoting the resources necessary.
Vance further warns that China has been placing economic pressure on Greenland and increasing military trainings around it.
We can't just bury our head in the sand, or in Greenland, bury our head in the snow and pretend that the Chinese are not interested in this very large landmass. We know that they are.
Meanwhile, Greenland's new prime minister says the U.S. visit signaled a lack of respect and calls for unity in the face of what he calls pressure from the outside. Greenland lawmakers also formed a new government right before Vance's visit to band together to resist U.S. pressure. The vice president, though, says the U.S. respects Greenland, but also is the one who can protect it.
Because we're the only nation on earth that will respect their sovereignty and respect their security, because their security is very much our security, as these brave Americans should.
The vice president also thanked U.S. service members who are serving in that remote military base, saying they're doing a tough duty in a harsh place to keep Americans safe. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Now, Vice President JD Vance and other officials at the U.S. military base in Greenland today sound the alarm over an increasing presence of the Chinese Communist Party and Russian military. And joining me to discuss is former CIA officer Claire Lopez. Claire, thank you so much for joining us. President Trump has been reiterating that the U.S. could partner or control Greenland, an autonomous region or semi-autonomous that's part of Denmark. Now, here's Vice President Vance in Greenland earlier today.
Denmark has not kept pace in devoting the resources necessary to keep this base, to keep our troops, and in my view, to keep the people of Greenland safe. Greenland really matters for the security of the United States. It's extremely vulnerable right now. And if the people of Greenland were willing to partner with the United States, and I think that they ultimately will partner with the United States, we could make them much more secure. We could do a lot more protection, and I think they'd fare a lot better economically as well.
So, Claire, a lot to unpack here, but first off, why is the U.S. taking control of Greenland important for international security?
Well, a number of reasons. One is its geographic location. Greenland, of course, borders on, is up in part of it, the Arctic Circle, where both Russian and Chinese forces are active increasingly, certainly in shipping lanes. But also with an eye on the vast mineral, oil, and gas resources that Greenland has. But I will note that Vice President JD Vance, as well as President Trump, have always emphasized that this must be a choice of the people of Greenland. We're not just going to march in and take over.
Now, on that, Greenland Parliament member has acknowledged this in an interview today. He said that there needs to be more partnership with the U.S. for international security. He also says that Greenland may use this to become independent from Denmark, too. Let's take a look.
We know that the U.S. needs Greenland in regards to national security, international security, and also for the Greenlandic security. So I hope that the new government of Greenland will take this as a pragmatic way to improve the relations with the United States and also work on our own sovereignty of Greenland, which was taken away from us in 1953 from Denmark. We just want it back, and we need to have an independent Greenland.
So, Claire, we've seen some pushback from Greenland over talks that the U.S. could possibly annex the country, but how do you see their partnership moving forward?
I think it's going to be an outcome of discussions between the United States and Greenland, and of course Denmark as well. I think that there are a number of advantages, as Vice President JD Vance noted in his comments there in Greenland today. There are a number of advantages for Greenland proposing a partnership of some kind with the United States, and that has to do with economic advantages. For example, the exploitation of its very impressive oil, gas, mineral, including rare earth mineral, natural resources.
Right, and on that, a study from the Center for Strategic and International Studies last year found that that region is very much rich in the minerals and oil. But how has China been working to bolster commercial as well as military capabilities there? And as well, what would happen if the U.S. doesn't secure it?
Well, we know that currently China controls something like 70% of the rare earth elements resources across the world, not just in China, but other places like Africa, and has expressed interest in participating in exploitation of Greenland's rare earth elements resources, which would, if it went forward, would give China an even greater share of control over these important minerals. Another reason why the United States is very interested in partnering with Greenland ourselves in order that China not necessarily expand its control over that much of a percentage of the Earth's rare earth elements.
And lastly, Denmark this year is allocating $2 billion to boost its military presence in the Arctic. And the U.S. already has multiple agreements to protect Greenland, agreements with Denmark. How effective is that $2 billion going to be to fend off Russian and Chinese aggression there, as well as since America is also on the hook for this, they should have more control and see what happens there. That's what some U.S. officials like Secretary Marco Rubio has been arguing. What's your take?
Well, you know, we have had, the United States has had an Air Force base to the northwestern side of Greenland. It used to be called Thule Air Force Base, now called, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Patuxent Air Force Base. And it's a very important military outpost for the United States by agreement with the people of Greenland, but also with Denmark and NATO. And the relationship of the United States with NATO, the resources that the United States can bring to the defense of Greenland, quite a bit more than what Denmark would be able to provide itself. It is important that the United States maintain that defense posture for Greenland itself, for NATO, and for the United States.
Claire Lopez, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us here today.
Thank you.
And now the Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court for permission to continue deporting Venezuelan illegal immigrants believed to be members of the terrorist gang Tren de Aragua. NTD's legal correspondent, Arlene Richards, has more on this.
In a 40-page emergency filing Friday, the Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court to set aside two lower court rulings. The rulings are temporarily blocking the president from deporting illegal Venezuelan immigrants under the wartime law. Meanwhile, the district court judge extended the block on Friday until April 12th. Trump wrote a proclamation invoking the law, saying the immigrants are members of terrorist gang Tren de Aragua and calling it an invading force. More than 200 suspected members have already been deported to an El Salvador prison under a negotiated agreement between the two countries. Alternatively, they're asking the highest court to pause the blocking orders until the court can conduct a complete review. The request comes after a D.C. District Court judge and a majority appeals court panel ordered the president to stop using the 18th century law to deport individuals. The courts say some of them may not be members of the gang. They've decided that each individual should be granted a hearing to determine their membership. The Justice Department argued in court papers that federal courts shouldn't interfere with sensitive diplomatic negotiations. It also claimed that the immigrants should make their case in a federal court in Texas where they are being detained. It's unclear whether or not the Supreme Court will review the case. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
A U.S. appeals court today ruled that Elon Musk and members of Doge can make further cuts to the USAID while they appeal a lower court order that has blocked them. The Doge team says that they're bringing a business-minded approach to the federal government. So far, the group says that it saved over $100 billion in tax dollars, with the ultimate goal of slashing the federal deficit in half. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports.
Doge is working towards a lofty goal to cut the federal government's budget from $7 trillion to $6 trillion. Musk says his team has found casual waste in the billions.
The government is not efficient, and there's a lot of waste and fraud. So we feel confident that a 15% reduction can be done without affecting any of the critical government services. 10-question survey that you could do with SurveyMonkey cost you about $10,000. The government was being charged almost $1 billion for that.
For just the survey?
$1 billion for a simple online survey. Do you like the national park?
In an effort to make the behind-the-scenes work more transparent, Elon Musk and his Doge team joined Fox's Bret Baier. When asked about sensitive issues like whether Social Security and Medicaid are on the chopping block, he said their team will make the programs stronger by rooting out fraud.
Legitimate people, as a result of the work of Doge, will receive more Social Security, not less. I want to emphasize that. As a result of the work of Doge, legitimate recipients of Social Security will receive more money, not less money.
You can call Social Security. We learned 40% of the phone calls that they get are from fraudsters.
If we don't do it, America's going to go insolvent. We're going to go bankrupt. And nobody's going to get anything.
They say a main issue causing inefficiencies in the government are outdated computer systems that cost around $100 billion to maintain. So far, the group has cut consulting contracts, unused federal buildings, duplicate programs, and DEI initiatives. According to Doge's website, the group has saved every taxpayer $800 so far, with the ultimate goal of slashing the federal deficit in half and passing a financial audit. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.